Sonic. I've made way too many videos about that guy. For most of this year, I've decided to take a little Sonic break because I was getting kinda tired of making those videos, but now that it's been a while, I'm getting the itches again. With the new game just having been released and another movie on the way, I'm just in the mood to talk about the series again. So today, I thought we could take a look through some of my personal favorite Sonic games, the Boost games. Now, don't get me wrong, when the Boost formula is done badly, it's really bad. But when it's done well, ooh, it's so good. So today I want to take a look at every single Sonic Boost game to see how well each of them hold up. And I don't just mean the main console Boost games, I mean all the Boost games. We're not skipping out today, I have to get my fix. Unless there's one that I forgot, then we're going to skip that one. When I hear most people talk about the Boost games, I feel like the starting point is usually Sonic Unleashed. And while that was the first Boost game on home consoles, the concept actually originally started on the DS with Sonic Rush. Now, Sonic Rush is a game developed by the people who made the Sonic Advance trilogy of games. I actually did a video on those a while back if you're curious about my thoughts on those games. In that video, I basically said that while I enjoyed all three games, the second one really stuck out to me just because of its pure focus on speed. At times that game could even feel like a Boost game even though that mechanic was nowhere to be found. So when they were trying to come up with an idea for the new Sonic game for the DS, they decided that they would try to make something even faster, and thus Sonic Rush, and the Boost formula as a whole, was born. So in this game you play as two main characters with Sonic and Blaze who both play mostly the same. Instead of just having you choose between one of the two characters whenever you play, the game is actually split between two main campaigns with Sonic's and Blaze's stories. For the most part, they're kind of the same, with the only main difference being that you take on the levels in different orders, and the levels themselves change up a little bit. In Sonic's campaign, you actually have to do special stages so you can get all the Chaos Emeralds, but with Blaze, you just automatically get her version of the Chaos Emeralds whenever you beat a boss. One thing that immediately stands out about this game is that it just feels really good to move around in. The controls are tight enough for platforming sections, but also allow you to reach really fast speeds at the same time. The levels accommodate for this movement really well, for the most part. I found myself really enjoying a lot of the levels in this game, but I can't lie, the further you get into this game, the more the levels can just kind of feel frustrating and unfair. A lot like some of the advanced games, this game can have a lot of annoying gimmicks or instant kill level elements that can make some of your early playthroughs of this game slightly more infuriating. But once you start to get the hang of it, this game is super fun, and I really liked it. Unlike future Boost games, where you get boost from rings or weird-looking aliens, in this game we have a trick system that you can use after launching off of a spring or other level elements. Doing these tricks will build up your boost meter, and I think this is a unique and pretty cool idea that fits really well into the game. The act of doing these tricks is just pressing the same button over and over again, but I don't care because it feels good and is fun. My only major complaint about the game is that the bosses can get quite annoying at times. Not all of them are really that bad, and none of them get as bad as the torture I went through in Sonic Advance 2, but they definitely could use a bit of improvement. Even though it has plenty of issues, Sonic Rush is a really good start to this video, and I can only hope the rest of these games can keep up. After Sonic Rush proved to be a pretty fun time, the next Boost game to be made actually ended up being a direct follow-up to that game with Sonic Rush Adventure. Gameplay-wise, this is pretty much exactly what you would expect from a sequel to Sonic Rush, because it just plays like Sonic Rush. The only difference I noticed at first is that you can do these special air tricks that let you extend your time in the air. Then I realized that they were in the first game, but I just didn't notice. I found the stages to be pretty fun in this game. I think the first game had a few stages that were better than the stuff in this game, but also it had a few stages that were worse than the stuff in this game, so I think it evens out in the end. One weird thing though is that these levels usually have some section where the game goes 3D and slows way down. I guess these parts are kind of cool, but they also aren't that fun to play through, so I don't really know why they're here. But the main difference between Sonic Rush and Sonic Rush Adventure is that Rush Adventure has way more downtime between the stages. The game takes place in an ocean with a bunch of islands on it. To get to those islands, you have to sail a boat to get to them. But to get the boat, you have to get materials. To get the materials, you just sort of have to play through the same stages over and over again. And then once you get the boat, you of course have to chart the way you want to go, and then play a minigame that changes depending on which boat you are using. Gotta say, that's a lot of hassle compared to just selecting another level. I don't mind replaying these stages for materials, since replaying stages to get better at them is kind of the whole point of these games. You just now have a reason to do it. The weird sailing mini games are fine, and I enjoy the ones where you're on the jet ski, but all the other ones are just meh. The nice thing though is that once you get to a level, you can just select it from a menu from then on, making replaying these stages for materials not that bad. We also have side quests now, which is interesting. I saw one that told me the reward for beating it was a dinosaur, and I was very curious as to what that meant. And yeah, it didn't disappoint. Blaze also returns as a playable character, except now you can just choose to play as her whenever, instead of her having an entire extra campaign you have to do. Honestly, I think this game is about on the same enjoyment level as the first Sonic Rush for me. It has a few weird and annoying choices, but ultimately I found this game to be about as enjoyable as the first one. After the first two Sonic Rush games, Sonic Team looked over at what was going on the DS and said, "Oh, that's a good idea, let's do that." And with that, Sonic Unleashed was born, being the first 3D boost game ever made, setting up a formula that would be used quite a lot after. Now, I'm playing this game on an Xbox One, since Xbox is really the only platform this game is readily available on. I know that if I got this game on Series X, it would have that nice 60 FPS upgrade, which, trust me, this game could use, but I don't really feel like buying a new Xbox because that's probably like the only game I would play on it. But back to the actual game, man, the daytime stages in this game are so good. This game just really knows how to make you feel like you're just blasting through a level. The game also isn't really a pushover either. As someone who has played a lot of these games, this is the one that I probably struggle with the most. This is both a blessing and a curse, because on repeat playthroughs of these levels, it gives you a lot more to get better at and work on. But on your first playthrough, it can make the levels slightly frustrating, since a lot of these obstacles just sort of come out of nowhere, and you wouldn't really know how to react unless you've already played the level. Also, just with how the game controls, precise or slower platforming in these levels just doesn't feel good. Sonic is designed to move forward and forward only, so when you're asked to do something else, it just doesn't work. But once you get used to how the game controls and get to know the levels a little bit more, it's really, really good. But if you were paying attention earlier, I referred to these stages as the daytime stages, and anyone not in the know probably had no idea why I called them that. It's time to talk about the other part of this game. So in Unleashed, we have the daytime stages, which act as your boost levels that let you run all fast and stuff, and then we have the nighttime levels, where you play as a new form of Sonic called the Werehog, who can't go fast, and instead has stretchy arms for some reason. People are pretty unanimous in saying that the daytime levels are good, but when it comes to the night stages, people get a lot more divided. This part of the game acts as a brawler or beat 'em up, where you just have hordes of enemies to go after and a bunch of different moves you can use to do that. There are also a lot of slower platforming sections, which can be fun. I land more on the side that the Werehog isn't that bad, and a lot of the hate for it was just overblown because it was just popular to hate Sonic when this game came out. Now, I'm not going to act like these sections are great and don't have that many problems, because they do, but they're also not the worst thing ever. My main problems with these sections are just the length, because they can go on for a lot longer than they need to, and the weird lock-on system to grab things. A lot of the platforming in these sections is reliant on you grabbing ledges or poles, and you have to wait for this lock-on icon to show up before you can actually do any of that. Even when you're really close to a ledge and think that maybe the game will just automatically grab it like every other platformer ever, no, you gotta wait for the lock-on and then do it yourself. This would be fine if the little reticle actually showed up half the time. You have to be like right next to where you want to grab onto just for it to show up, which makes it annoying to use. They also rely a lot on these like tightrope balancing sections, which, yeah, I can't really defend it anyway, it's just annoying. I know I'm complaining a lot, but I really didn't mind these sections that much, and I did find the combat fun most of the time. The Werehog is mostly just here to make the game longer, because if you just played the daytime levels, this game would be a whole lot shorter. Near the end of the game, you have the final big level with Eggman Land, which is a really cool level in concept. It has you switching back and forth between both normal Sonic and Werehog Sonic, giving the level a bit more variety in its design. I do kind of enjoy this level just because of the cool concept, but it's just way harder than anything else in the game, and it took me 80 minutes to beat my first time through. Yeah, this level should probably be like a bonus challenge, like a victory road, rather than a mandatory story stage, but hey, what are you gonna do? Unleashed is a good game with some lower points here and there, but with a few tweaks to the werehog and just a bit better performance, this game could be even better. Next up, we have the Wii and PS2 version of Sonic Unleashed. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really feel like playing this game again, so I'm just going to rewrite my review I did in an older video of mine. If you think this makes me a lazy, awful YouTuber, that's okay, please leave a comment about it. Okay, so looking through what I said about it in my old video, it looks like this game was a really weird version of the boost formula. Instead of the boost just being a bar that depletes whenever you boost, it's instead broken into segments, and whenever you boost, you just have to use that entire segment before you can slow down again. To me, that just kind of seems like a weird change, but to be honest, I don't think it makes it bad. The daytime stages in this game seem enjoyable enough, but the nighttime stages are kind of what ruins it. While I like the nighttime stages in the 360 and PS3 versions of the game, in the Wii version, everything has been simplified, the level design isn't as good, and it's just a generally less enjoyable experience. Overall, this is a fine enough version of the game, especially if you were a kid in 2008 who only had a Wii or PS2, but to me, there is no real reason to play this over the main console version nowadays. So in the past, I've been kinda mean towards Sonic Colors and called it a bad game and stuff like that. But after going back to it for this video, yeah, it's fine. I think I just wanted to be mad at something. It's still not my favorite, and a lot of my complaints still apply, but they just don't bother me as much anymore. Some of the levels in this game can genuinely be really fun and enjoyable. The problem is that a lot of the levels in this game are just smaller filler levels that were made mandatory for no reason other than padding. The weird padding decisions are still just what bother me the most about this game. Like, they split longer full levels into two shorter ones. Like I just said, they made a bunch of stuff that should have been extra mandatory, and just other weird stuff. As far as how the game plays, this game was originally a Wii exclusive, so instead of trying to cram an Unleashed level game into that system while using that weird controller, they instead just decided to simplify everything, meaning that you have less movement options as well as more basic levels. Unleashed had plenty of 2D sections in it, but this game really relies on them in a lot of its levels. I don't think that's inherently a bad thing, but a lot of these sections have slower, more tedious platforming that just doesn't feel very good. Like I said for Unleashed, Sonic in these games just isn't made for slow or precise platforming, so trying to put that kind of stuff in it just isn't very fun. But you see, running around and going fast, or not so fast, isn't all you do in this game. To try and spice things up a little bit, this game adds these new little guys called Wisps. These basically act like power-ups, which is something that the Sonic series doesn't really do that often. The closest thing I can think of are the shields in the classic and adventure games, which could let you take an extra hit and sometimes give little bonuses. But in this game, the Wisps can actually drastically change the way you play the game. You got Laser that lets you zip around all fast, the Rocket that lets you shoot yourself farther up into the level, the Drill that lets you go underground, and Frenzy that just lets you go on a big rampage. These are all power-ups that I feel add to the variety of the game while not completely ruining the flow of movement. Then you have Cube and Hover, which just suck all the fun out of everything. Cube has a cool idea that is used in interesting ways, but to use it, you have to completely stop whatever you are doing to do this ground pound animation that lasts way longer than it should. And then there's Hover, which just makes you move so slow, and I always feel annoyed whenever I have to use it. But what I think stands out the most about Sonic Colors is the level theming. All of the levels are just so creative and are genuinely some of the most interesting looking levels in the entire series. All of the different zones in the game have very distinct looks to them, and there's genuinely no way you could get any of them confused with each other. The whole game takes place in space on these planets Eggman chained together to make this big amusement park, and only like 2 of the areas use the space theme in the sorts of ways you would expect them to, and even then there's still a creative twist to it. Instead of a level just taking place in space, it instead is taking place in this big parade that is being put on in space. You're not just platforming on asteroids, you're platforming on a bunch of asteroids that have been turned into this weird factory with a roller coaster running through it. For every complaint I have about the level design for this game, I have a compliment for the level theming. Now for this video, I used the Colors Ultimate version of the game, which I know doesn't have the best reputation, but in my opinion, most of the bugs that plague this game have been patched out, and the only real complaint I have with it is that the lighting is just really bad a lot of the time. Other than that, I think this is a fine way to play the game. Sonic Colors is a game I have quite a few issues with, but at the end of the day, I would say that it is a good game, and a lot of people seem to like it way more than I do, so who am I to say that it sucks? The console version of Sonic Colors sucks when you compare it to the DS version. While my opinion on the main version of Sonic Colors has definitely turned to be a bit more positive, I don't think I'm ever really going to change my opinion that I think the DS version is better. This game is built off of the framework of the two Rush games, except some things have been changed to make it more like Colors. Boost is now gained from Wisps instead of a trick system, and we have the new addition of the homing attack, which I honestly feel like should have been in the Rush games to begin with, so I'm happy to see it here. This game basically just takes the concept of Sonic Colors and then makes it more like Sonic Rush, and since I prefer the levels in the two Sonic Rush games over Colors, it makes sense that I would like this more. The Wisp system returns in this game, except we've had a few cuts with the Hover and Cube Wisps not making an appearance in this game, and as someone who did not like either of those power-ups, this makes me happy. To make up for those two not being here, we now have a new Wisp called Burst, which I think fits into these levels a lot better than Hover or Cube would have. Other than that, all of the other Wisps are the same as they were in the console version of the game, and I like them. While I do think some of the levels in the original Sonic Rush are a bit more fun, I think it kind of evens out because this game doesn't feature any annoying gimmicks or frequently appearing bottomless pits. I also generally enjoy the bosses in this game over the bosses in both the console version of Colors and the two Rush games. This game also gives you the ability to collect all of the Chaos Emeralds and even unlock a secret boss at the end by doing so. To get them, you have to do these special stages, which usually I don't really like special stages that much, but in this game I actually found them to be kind of enjoyable. This game definitely isn't perfect, but I think it fits perfectly with the two Sonic Rush games to just make a really solid little trilogy of Sonic games on the DS. So far we've talked about some good games, even some really good games, but now it's time to talk about a masterpiece. If you couldn't tell by now, Sonic Generations is easily my favorite Sonic game and honestly one of my favorite games ever made. I have almost 60 hours on this game on Steam, and that's just from me replaying the same stages over and over again because I really like them. But for this video, I decided to use the version of the game present in Sonic X Shadow Generations. 1, because it's just the newest version of the game, and 2, because gameplay-wise, it's practically unchanged, at least from what I can tell. I guess I'll just go ahead and get some of the changes out of the way since I don't really care about them that much. They added collectible chows to the levels, which I like because it gives me more things to do in these stages, and they changed a lot of the dialogue. I'm going to be honest, I don't really like these rewrites a whole lot. They're just way too focused on referencing old stuff. Like, there's this one scene where they're talking about how they are time traveling, and then Sonic goes, "Without the time stones?" To me, that's just way too annoying and in your face. But to be fair, the story and dialogue were never what I liked about this game, so the change doesn't really bother me in any way at all. I haven't even mentioned the stories of the other games, and I'm really only mentioning this because it seemed kind of relevant. Unlike Sonic Colors, which made some changes to the Unleashed Boost gameplay style to simplify things for the Wii, Sonic Generations acts more like a direct follow-up to Unleashed. Yes, changes were still made, but more just to make Sonic easier to control, like a better drift and making the boost and homing attack on separate buttons. The new version of the game also offers some new control options and layouts, but that's not really that important to this video. The levels themselves are just kind of more of what you would expect from an Unleashed-like game. One thing this game does really well is just offering all sorts of routes and pathways you can take, sometimes without you even realizing it. You'll jump over a pit or something and just continue on with the level, not knowing that if you had fallen down that pit, you would have taken a completely different path. It makes replaying these levels so much more fun because you can try and find different routes to take that might be faster or allow you to get secrets. One thing that might be a negative for some is that the game can be very easy, but to me that's not really a problem since the levels are so well designed that I just really enjoy replaying them without any incentive to do it. Oh yeah, Classic Sonic is also here too. Since this game was an anniversary title, Sonic Team decided that a cool gimmick for this game would be to have Classic Sonic playable along with Modern Sonic. A big complaint I often hear about Classic Sonic in this game is that the physics and movement aren't really that accurate to the original Genesis games, and to that I say, I don't really care. As long as Sonic feels good to control and the levels are designed well around him, I could care less about how accurate it is to older games. A lot of the classic Sonic levels I found to be just as fun as some of the modern Sonic levels. Except for you, Planet Wisp Act 1, that level's messed up. I never want to see one of those stupid gear things again. But for the most part, the classic levels are just really fun and enjoyable, and I enjoy the classic levels in this game way more than like the entirety of Sonic Superstars, and I don't even think that game's that bad. One of the most noticeable things about this game though is that all of the level themes are reused from older games. That obviously makes sense in this game since it's an anniversary title all about celebrating the series past. They probably could have stopped using some of these level themes after this game, but we'll get into that later. But the thing with this game is that they don't just reuse the level themes and then move on. They give these specific versions of the levels their own identity. There are level gimmicks specific to the Generations versions of these levels that are not present in the originals. As someone who is very tired of Green Hill showing up every single game, when I say that I love both Green Hill levels in this game, that means something. Okay, a final few things before we move on to the next game. Rival fights are cool, Shadow and Silver ones especially. The game's got boss fights. I really like the Perfect Chaos boss. All the other ones are just okay. And finally, the game has a bunch of side challenges you can do, which aside from a few aren't mandatory to progress in the game. These are just kind of alright, not great, not bad either. This game was easily the best direction for Sonic to go moving forward. Classic Sonic was a fun gimmick for this game, but the boost formula was truly perfected in this game, and all they needed to do was just make another one of these. I sure hope they didn't completely mess things up after this one. Up next, we have our final downgraded / portable version of one of the main console games with Sonic Generations for the 3DS. This game was made by the same developers of the Rush games and Colors DS, so I have decently high hopes that this will be a fairly decent package. You see, all you aspiring video makers out there, what I just did is called the YouTuber's trick. Look it up, it's real. You see, the YouTuber's trick is when I, the YouTuber, set up the fact that I am either excited or looking forward to a game or other piece of media, but in reality, this piece of media is either bad or just okay, ultimately giving the grand reveal that I, the YouTuber, am disappointed by it. So anyways, as I was saying, this game is just okay. It's not horrible or the worst I've ever played, but it's also not really that good. This game, like the main console versions, has the two separate gameplay styles of modern and classic Sonic. In that game, both styles were very different from each other, but in this game, well, that Sonic is light blue, and that Sonic is dark blue. Obviously, modern Sonic has the boost, but now since both gameplay styles are only in 2D, it just makes modern Sonic feel like classic Sonic with the boost, and classic Sonic feel like modern Sonic without the boost. This isn't helped by the fact that extremely early on in the game, classic Sonic gets a homing attack, which just blurs the line even further. Classic Sonic could get a homing attack in the console version, but you unlocked it by getting all the red rings in the final main level of the game, meaning that by the time you got it, the game was pretty much over. Since this game gives it to you so early on, it kinda just makes the levels feel too reliant on it, which in turn makes it feel less like classic Sonic. The level design is okay, nothing to really write home about. I do like that they chose different level themes from the original game, giving this game just a little bit of its own identity. They even have a stage based on Sonic Rush, which is really cool to see. Rival fights and bosses also return here. Bosses are okay, and the rival fights are all just races now instead of actual fights. The game's fine, but just nothing that I would really choose to play unless I had to for some YouTube video or something, but I can't imagine that ever happening. It's time to talk about Sonic Forces, for like the third time now. For how much I really don't like this game, it just really fascinates me. There are a few pretty good ideas here, but almost all of them feel like they were not given the time nor the attention they needed to really become anything special. On top of that, all of the other ideas were just directly taken from other games. So for a little context here, after Sonic Generations, Sonic Team just dropped this winning formula that everyone loved for seemingly no other reason than they wanted to make Sonic Lost World. And you can't convince me that anyone wanted to make Sonic Lost World. Then there was Sonic Boom. It was a dark time, but the thing is, Sonic Team didn't work on Sonic Boom, meaning that they had 4 years between Sonic Lost World and Sonic Forces to make a new game. I don't believe for a second that this game took 4 years to make, but the reason I'm bringing this all up is because after the very poor state that the Sonic series was in after Lost World and Boom, we really needed a win here with Sonic Forces. Sonic Forces was not that. To give the one positive, I do think the game looks nice, but man, it just lacks that level of detail that games like Generations and Unleashed had. In those games, you were running through some amazing looking environments. I mean, just look at Green Hill and Generations, and then compare it to Forces. Speaking of Green Hill, that level just sort of sums up my problem with this game. Instead of coming up with a new idea, they just use an old one that they know people will recognize, and then somehow make it worse. That's why this idiot is here. Speaking of that idiot, this game is split into 3 different gameplay styles with Modern Sonic, Classic Sonic, and the new custom avatar. So since this video is about the Boost games, we might as well start off with Modern Sonic. He doesn't feel that good. He controls a lot like he does in Colors, except just worse. He's okay in 3D and then just really bad in 2D. The level design doesn't really help much either because it's just a lot of straightforward hallways. So much of this game is just running in a straightforward line with literally no other input necessary. It's true that the Boost games are mostly just running forward, but typically there's a little bit more to it than that. In the other games I've talked about in this video, you have to actually make an effort to react to what's coming, and if you just run forward without thinking, you're likely to just die or get sent to a lower, slower route. But in this game, it's just go, go, go. No, it's fine. You don't have to think. Just press the square button. There are some more platforming heavy 2D sections, but like I said, Sonic doesn't feel good to control in 2D, so these parts aren't that fun either. And you want to know what the best part about all of this is? Modern Sonic is by far the most fun character in the game. The avatar is up next, and while I like the idea of getting to make your own character in this game, the whole idea is just kind of ruined by the fact that he sucks to play as. In most cases, the avatar just feels like Modern Sonic, but with a slower homing attack and no boost. The avatar can use the Wispins, which can be fun in certain levels, but overall just slightly change how you attack enemies. The avatar's one saving grace are the levels where you play as both the avatar and Modern Sonic, making for a gameplay style that actually feels unique and kinda fun. There are only like 3 of these levels though, and they all have these double boost sections, which quite literally require 0 input. You can just put your controller down during these parts. And then we have Classic Sonic. Oh boy, do we have Classic Sonic. I was very positive about Classic Sonic in Generations, but in Forces, they took everything that I liked about Classic Sonic and then threw it out the window. The level designs are boring, the physics are very bad, and don't even work well with the stages designed around them, and also Classic Sonic just shouldn't be here. Literally like 2 or 3 months before this game came out, we got Sonic Mania, which was one of the best Classic Sonic games ever made, so we didn't need more Classic Sonic, and even then, they could have at least made it good. My biggest problem with stuff like Classic Sonic being in the game is that it's just an idea that has already been done before. Classic Sonic, the Wisps, and half of the level themes in the game are all just reused ideas that were all done better in other games. Sonic Forces is just a boring mess of a game that did have some cool ideas like the Avatar, but just never did anything special with them. Hopefully this is my last time reviewing this game. When it comes to Sonic games, I prefer it when they are short, get to the point, and most importantly, have good level design. I've found that with Sonic games, when they are longer, it tends to be because they are filled with some sort of padding. That could be fun sometimes, but a majority of the time, it's just not great, and I would rather get back to the main thing I'm there for. Sonic Frontiers is a game that is long for a Sonic game, wastes quite a bit of your time, and has level design that scholars would call bad, yet I have 80 hours logged into the game. Yeah, by all means, Sonic Frontiers should probably be one of my least favorite games in the entire series. It's a complete shift away from the direction I want the series to go in, and has a very long list of issues. But yet I find myself having a pretty fun time whenever I come back to it. So this game was sort of Sonic's attempt to break into the open world or open zone genre. I remember when this game was first starting to get talked about a lot, and I heard tons of people talking about how they've always wanted an open world Sonic game, and I looked at them and I said, why? Like I said earlier, it's the levels that make Sonic fun. Going fast feels good because the level is designed to where going fast is a reward for playing the game well. In an open world, you're just kind of running around for no other reason than you just can. That being said, the open world aspects of this game are easily the highlight for me. The world is filled with all sorts of little platforming challenges and puzzles that are pretty easy for the most part, but it gives something to do besides just running around from objective to objective. There are a few examples of some bigger platforming sections that are actually pretty fun, but those are very few and far between. Sonic Frontiers is very much a game that you just play if you don't want to think that much. You just run around until you hit a spring or something and it's like, oh, okay, I guess we're going here now. But you're probably wondering why this game was put in a video about boost games, because so far it looks pretty much like nothing else in the video. And yeah, I would agree. But do you see that word down there under the Breath of the Wild stamina bar? Yep, that says boost. Now, boosting in this game is less like boosting in all of the other games and more like a run button. The boost meter acts more like stamina. You can recharge it with rings, but it will also just recharge naturally. Kind of like the Breath of the Wild stamina bar, the boost is also much weaker with it no longer damaging enemies. They did this because if you could do that, then that would bypass one of the biggest new aspects of the game, the combat. Yeah, I don't have much to say about this because it's pretty simple, which is probably for the best. The main issue is that a lot of the buttons you press to perform different moves also act as basic actions like boosting or jumping, so sometimes when you mean to boost and then homing attack an enemy, you do this instead. I enjoy the mini-bosses, and the main bosses of the game are just fun spectacles, even if they aren't really that hard. But much like the other games in this video, this game does feature quite a few linear stages to go through. They aren't good. The first major problem is that Sonic feels terrible to control in these levels. He cannot turn at all. It's a weird problem to have because in the open world, Sonic feels pretty good to control. It's part of what makes those sections enjoyable. But even besides that, the level designs are okay at best and atrocious at worst. I think these levels work fine when you view them as just another extra objective in the open world, but when you isolate them on their own, it is very bad and embarrassing. It doesn't help that every level reuses one of 4 level themes, making them all blend together and lack any sort of creativity. On top of that, most of these level designs were just straight up taken from other games and then made worse here. I found Cyberspace a bit more enjoyable once you unlock the spin dash and power boost, but not much better. It's still bad. I do like Sonic Frontiers, but a lot of the problems really just frustrate me, and I really don't want to see another game like this unless they make some major improvements. There's also the Final Horizon DLC that came out. I don't feel like getting into that today. That's a whole other can of worms to open, so maybe another time if anyone even wants me to talk about that. The next game we have here is one that I honestly was just going to leave out at first because it's an Apple Arcade game, but then I saw that I had a free trial I could use, so why not? Let's talk about Sonic Dream Team. I'm going to be real. I did not expect much at all from this game since it's made by the same devs who made Sonic Dash and other mobile games. It doesn't mean they are bad developers, but there just wasn't much reason to think that they would make a good Boost Sonic game. But to my surprise, I ended up enjoying this game quite a bit. I played it on my iPhone 11, which is obviously not the best hardware for this game, so the footage looks a little crusty, it's not great. But what's nice is that they clearly emphasize performance here, because while it didn't look the greatest, the game ran great. The main problem I ran into was just the fact that my phone was playing this pretty demanding game while also recording it, meaning that my phone was reaching record temperatures. Only time I've seen it get hotter than this was when I left it out in the sun for a few hours. For these reasons, I did not record much of the game. I only really recorded the stuff from the first 2 areas. But I did beat the game and enjoyed it quite a bit. It's not better than most of the home console Boost games, except for maybe Forces, but it's still pretty unique compared to those games. One big thing is that you have different playable characters that have unique abilities. There are 6 characters split between 3 gameplay styles. You have Sonic and Amy for speed, Tails and Cream for flight, and Knuckles and Rouge can climb and glide like they usually can in other games. I don't have footage for Knuckles and Rouge, but just trust me here. All of these characters are unified by the fact that they can boost, making all of them feel similar enough to where it's not really that jarring to have to switch between them. I think one of the best things about this game is just how natural the movement feels in it. This game has a proper momentum system along with the boosting, which allows for some pretty interesting platforming where you're running on walls and jumping off half pipes. While design-wise, the levels aren't anything too special, the movement just feels so good and natural. This game feels better to control than a lot of other Sonic games. The only real downside is that since this is meant to be a mobile game that can be played on a touchscreen, you don't have many different moves. I think if they took the framework of this game and gave it a proper console budget and console release, it could turn into something really special. Honestly, even just a console/PC port of the game the way it is now would be pretty cool. The only thing I've forgotten to mention so far is that the game does require you to replay levels with slight variations a lot to get the collectibles required to progress the game. I kinda like this since it pretty much turned the game into a collectathon, which Sonic games really never are, but I can't deny it did get pretty repetitive at some points when I just wanted to move on. Don't get me wrong though, if you don't have an Apple device or already used up your free trial for Apple Arcade, you're not really missing out on that much. Also, playing this on my phone was not a very pleasant experience since I wanted to use a controller since that makes the game much more playable, but then I didn't have a great place to set my phone, meaning I was having to look down at it the entire time I was playing, which will probably give me neck problems in like 10 years. I think the ideal way to play this game as of now would be on an iPad or a Mac computer, since that would give you a better screen and more easily allow you to play it on a desk or something like a normal person. This game isn't some sort of masterpiece, but it is a fun little side venture that I'm glad I checked out for this video. So the final game we have here today is both the newest Sonic release as well as the inspiration for this video, Shadow Generations. When Sonic X Shadow Generations first got announced, I'm going to be honest, I did not have much hope for the Shadow Generations portion of the game. But after finally playing it, holy crap, it's actually really good. After Forces and Frontiers, I had sort of lost my faith in Sonic Team's ability to make well-designed levels, but I guess they heard that criticism from a lot of people, and in response, they have made one of my new favorite Sonic games. I don't think I like it more than the original Sonic Generations, but it came a lot closer than I ever thought it would. To start off, the levels themselves are just designed very well, which was probably the biggest surprise here. It's definitely very different from how games like Unleashed and Generations were designed. I would actually say it's closer to Forces and Colors, which if you've watched this whole video probably sounds like a negative, but I think while it's similar to those games, it's also done far better than those games. The levels have all sorts of different shortcuts, fun platforming challenges, as well as interesting gimmicks and abilities to use, all of which add to the fun of the game rather than disrupting it or making me wish I wasn't using them. Like Generations, the levels are based on older level themes, but they did a good job of both choosing stages that aren't overdone, as well as giving each level their own unique level designs and gimmicks, making them feel very different from the original. The main thing that really allows these stages to change up as much as they do is all of the abilities Shadow has access to in this game. First, we have Chaos Control, which I used way more often and in way more creative ways than I thought I would. It basically allows you to freeze time as well as the stage timer, which can both give you an interesting new route to take, or just shave a few seconds off your time. Then we have the Doom powers, which majorly switch things up and easily have the greatest effect on the levels. There's Doom Spear, which allows you to shoot projectiles at objects and enemies, Doom Surf, which allows you to surf along the water, Doom Morph, which allows you to do whatever you would call this, and Doom Wings, which just let you fly. Doom Morph started out as my least favorite ability in the game, but after taking some time to actually learn how it works and how to use it, it's easily my favorite. I honestly wish they had used it more since it's introduced fairly late in the game, and I think it gave some really interesting variety in the stages it was used in. Another interesting thing about this game is that rather than having 3D stages that have 2D sections like Generations and most of the other home console boost games, this game has a 2D and 3D act for every stage. It's sort of similar to how they did Cyberspace and Frontiers. I genuinely found a lot of the 2D stages to be just as fun as a lot of the 3D ones. The 2D level for Kingdom Valley is genuinely amazing. The challenge acts in this game are also a lot of fun, which is good since you basically have to do all of them to beat the game. The game also has a little mini open world that you can explore between stages, which was fun enough. It's not nearly as in-depth as the islands and Frontiers. To be fair, it looks a lot nicer though. There were some fun platforming sections here and there, but nothing really all that special, which I'm fine with. As long as the levels are good, they can do whatever they want with the hub world. The boss fights were also surprisingly fun. They probably strike the best balance in the series between spectacle and actual fun gameplay. Whatever the next main Sonic game is, I think they kind of just need to do what they did here, but on more of a Frontiers level scale. But in the meantime, I'm very excited for that movie DLC, not even because it's tied in with the movie, but just because it will give me more to do in this game. So those were all of the Sonic Boost games. That was fun, for the most part. Looking back, I thought I would feel a lot more mixed about a lot of these games, but honestly, I came out of this video feeling very positive about most of these games. There's one I would call bad, and then two I would say I have mixed feelings on. Even then, the two games I have mixed feelings on, I still enjoy playing, especially Frontiers. And with the newest game being one of the games I enjoyed the most, it kind of feels good to have confidence in where the series is heading again, which I haven't had in a while. One thing I would definitely like to see is a Sonic X Shadow Generation style game, but for Unleashed. You know, it could be like Sonic X Big Unleashed. That would be cool.